People who retire at 55 don't end up 10 years behind the people who retire at 65. They end up with a portfolio roughly $1 million smaller, a healthcare bill that can swallow 66% of what they can safely withdraw, and a Social Security check permanently locked at 70% of what it could have been. All three of those hit simultaneously. And virtually every retirement calculator you've ever used only models one of them. The median savings for Americans aged 55 to 64 is $185,000 per the Federal Reserve's 2022 survey of consumer finances. The people who make it to 65 through 74, $200,000. The median retirement savings for those aged 55 to 64, $185,000, and 65 to 74, $200,000, are far below the $1.46 million magic number Americans believe they need to retire comfortably in 2026. That's a $15,000 median gap for a 10-year difference in retirement timing. Sounds almost manageable. It isn't, because that number completely hides the real problem. The median tells you what the middle looks like, but the arithmetic, the actual compounding math of what 10 more working years does to a portfolio in its most powerful decade, that tells a different story. And it's one the financial industry has very little incentive to explain to you clearly. Today, I'm going to show you three forces that hit early retirees simultaneously. Most people only model one of them. The third one, the most destructive of the three, almost never comes up in the standard how to retire early conversation. And there's a specific reason for that, which I'll get to. But before I get to any of that, there's a central idea I want to plant early, because it's going to make the rest of this easier to follow. Think of your working life as a harvest. You plant in your 20s, you tend in your 30s, you grow in your 40s. And the harvest, the period of maximum yield, happens in your mid-50s through early 60s. That's when your portfolio is largest, when compounding is working fastest, when peak earnings allow maximum contributions, when every dollar you add is sitting on top of a mountain of previous growth. Retire at 55 and you leave the field before the harvest. The crops are there, you just abandon them. You don't retire from the harvest, you retire after it. Hold that frame. It'll do a lot of work as this goes on. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you something about who actually retires early in America that will probably reframe everything you think you know about this subject. But first, let me do the math that nobody does. Start with a very specific number. $500,000 saved by age 55. That's a legitimate achievement. You're comfortably ahead of the median. You've been disciplined. You feel like you've earned the exit. The good news is that your mid-50s are your peak earning years. Federal Reserve data shows that incomes typically max out between 45 and 54, which means you're in a position to make serious headway on retirement accounts. That's actually the punchline. Your peak earning years and your most powerful compounding years overlap perfectly between 55 and 65. And if you retire at 55, you abandon both simultaneously. Here's the math. $500,000, 7% average annual return, and you keep contributing the maximum to your 401k at $23,500 per year. In 2025, you could contribute up to $23,500 to 401k or 403b plans. Over 10 years, doing nothing fancy, no market timing, no heroics. Your portfolio at 65 is approximately $1,300,000. Not double, 2.5 times your starting balance. Because in those last 10 years, your $500,000 base is generating $35,000 annually in returns alone before you add a single new contribution. The compounding has finally caught its own wind. Retire at 55 instead, you draw down 4% of $500,000, $20,000 per year, $1,667 a month from your savings, before taxes, before healthcare. You went from 1.3 million to 500,000. And you went from drawing 52,000 a year to drawing 20,000 for the privilege of leaving 10 years early. That's the first force. Stop accumulating. Start depleting. The switchover. But the problem isn't stopping the accumulation. The problem is what's waiting for you on the other side of that switchover the moment you leave your employer. Healthcare. You are 55 years old. Medicare doesn't start until 65. That's a 10-year gap during which you are on your own for health insurance on the private market or the ACA exchange or COBRA for the first 18 months. Health insurance represents one of the largest expenses for individuals who retire before 65, with monthly premiums of roughly $1,000 to $1,100 per person, meaningfully affecting how long retirement savings last. And as of the end of 2025, the enhanced ACA subsidies that helped millions of early retirees are gone. Many people qualified for a subsidy to help pay ACA premiums based on household income, but those subsidies expired at the end of 2025, full price, for 10 years. Paying about $12,000 to $13,000 per year in premiums per person can consume a notable portion of annual retirement income, particularly for households relying on withdrawals from savings or investments. Over 10 years, that's a minimum of $132,000 in premiums alone. Add deductibles, copays, and out-of-pocket costs, and you're realistically looking at $150,000 in healthcare spending before you see Medicare start. On a $20,000 annual portfolio withdrawal, $13,200 disappears in healthcare premiums alone in year one. You have $6,800 left for the rest of your life, $566 a month. That's not a retirement, that's financial triage. The harvest metaphor earns its keep right here. You left the field early, and now the frost comes. And the frost is $1,200 a month, every month, for a decade, just to keep yourself insured in a country where going uninsured while drawing down savings is not an option any rational person should choose. This is the point where someone always says, okay, but a real early retiree saves more than $500,000 by 55. They plan for the healthcare costs. And some of them do. About 40% of early retirees, according to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, left early because they were genuinely prepared. Roughly 2 out of 5 of those who retired early did so because they felt financially prepared. However, this group represents a minority compared to those whose circumstances necessitated an earlier exit, which means 60% left early without being prepared. And the number that explains that 60% is the one that should make you sit up straight. Stay with me. This next part changes everything. A study by the Employee Benefit Research Institute found that 58% of retirees leave the workforce earlier than planned, frequently due to factors beyond their control. Not slightly earlier. Earlier. On average, about 5 years separates what Americans plan and what happens. Non-retirees target 66. Most actually retire at 61. That difference is driven mostly by unplanned exits. The 2026 EBRI Retirement Confidence Survey breaks it down further. Among those who retired early, 41% cited a health problem or disability, up from 31% in 2025. Corporate changes, including downsizing, business closures, and reorganization, accounted for 35% of early retirements. Circumstances entirely outside the individual worker's control were responsible for 76% of all unplanned early retirements in 2025. 3 out of 4 people who retire early did not plan to. A 2018 Urban Institute analysis of full-time workers in their early 50s found that 2 out of every 3 eventually left their jobs involuntarily, with 56% citing employer-related reasons such as layoffs or business closings. Now, I want to stop and make the reversal explicit. You think the problem is that people who retire at 55 didn't save enough. The actual problem is that most of those people never intended to retire at 55. They got pushed, and they had not built the financial architecture to survive the scenario they told themselves would never happen to them. This is why early retirees save less than late retirees. Not because they're undisciplined, because 2 out of 3 of them lost 10 years of peak earning, peak contributing, peak compounding time to a forced exit and had modeled exactly 0 months of that possibility into their plan. And when a health event or a corporate reorganization hits you at 54 with $400,000 saved and no healthcare bridge, you don't fail suddenly, you fail slowly, one healthcare premium at a time, 1 month of reduced portfolio withdrawal at a time, until the math closes on you quietly in your early 70s and you are trying to figure out what to cut next. There's a specific pattern I see in this. Call it the 3-gear failure. Gear 1, the forced exit arrives 5 to 10 years before the planned exit. Gear 2. The early retiree starts drawing down a portfolio that was sized for later retirement at the 4% rate, not understanding the portfolio needs to last 40 years, not 30. Gear 3. Healthcare costs that the retirement calculator never asked about drain the first decade of what little runway remains. You don't have to trigger all 3 gears to have a problem. But for most forced exit early retirees, all 3 are spinning simultaneously. I've been running my own investments for over a decade, surrounded by accountants and fiscal lawyers who taught me how money actually moves. And the most expensive conversation I've had, not in fees, but in realizing what it costs when you don't have it, is the one about what happens when the exit isn't voluntary. Here's the part that separates the people who navigate a forced early exit from the ones who don't. Knowing these numbers and building a system around them are 2 very different things. I've had the data for years. The system is what turns data into outcomes. I built a digital book called The Exit Code, 8 chapters of retirement data distilled into a specific mathematical framework for anyone planning to exit the workforce in the next 5 to 15 years. 2 things in it are directly relevant to everything I've been describing. First, the 58% rule. Since 58% of retirees leave earlier than planned, I built a stress test model for people who are currently targeting 65 but need to survive financially if they're pushed out at 60. Not because you will be, because the data says the odds are meaningful and the people who survive it intact built the buffer before they needed it, not after. Second, the $14,000 invisible bill. That's the annualized healthcare gap that hits retirees under 65, adjusted by income and state, not a rounding error. A line item that needs its own dedicated fund before you calculate anything else about retirement timing. The exit code is available through the link in the description for less than 1 dinner out. It's built on 50 years of actual retirement data, not opinion. If you're 35 to 54 and you're serious about this, the time you spend with it will pay you back in the first year of retirement many times over. Let's keep moving. I told you there were 3 forces. You've heard 2 of them. The third is the one nobody wants to talk about because it involves a decision most people make emotionally, not mathematically, and the financial industry has no incentive to correct. Social Security. Data shows that in 2019, 51% of Americans retired at 61 or earlier, and 23% retired between 62 and 64, before Medicare coverage kicks in at 65. Most of those people, most of them, claim Social Security the moment they're eligible, at 62. The Social Security Administration reduces benefits by 30% for people who retire at 62, meaning they receive 70% of their full retirement benefit each month for life. That's not a temporary reduction, not a penalty you work off. It's a permanent mathematical lobotomy performed on your monthly income for the rest of your existence. For someone with a full retirement age of 67 and a primary insurance amount of $2,000 per month, claiming at 62 produces approximately $1,400 per month. Claiming at 70 produces approximately $2,480 per month. A 77% difference in monthly income for the same earnings history. $1,080 a month, more for the rest of your life, just by waiting 8 years. Over 20 years, which is roughly the planning horizon for someone reaching their late 60s in reasonable health, that difference compounds to $259,200. Locked away, permanently, gone, because the government website had a button and the check showed up. For each year, benefits are delayed past full retirement age. Monthly payments increase by approximately 8% up to age 70. Once benefits begin, the payment amount remains locked in for life, except for annual cost of living adjustments. 8%, guaranteed per year, with 0 volatility, 0 fees. No manager skimming a point off the top. Waiting beyond full retirement age increases your benefit by about 8% per year until age 70. Delaying until age 70 can increase your monthly Social Security payments by up to 24% compared to claiming at full retirement age. I have multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars invested. I've spent years reading about asset allocation, manager selection, factor tilts, tax efficiency, and I will tell you without hesitation, there is no investment available to a regular American that offers an 8% guaranteed annual return on a no-fee, zero volatility basis. The Social Security delay is the single best risk-adjusted trade in personal finance. And it gets almost no coverage because no financial professional makes a commission on it. Think about that incentive structure for a moment. You don't retire from the harvest, you retire after it. The Social Security timing decision is the last row in the field. Leave before it's done and you forfeit the most valuable crop. Now, I've been building towards something, and I want to name it directly. The three forces I've described, the compounding cliff, the healthcare bridge gap, and the Social Security timing penalty, these aren't three separate problems. They're one synchronized system that activates the moment you leave work before 65. And what makes the system so destructive is that each force amplifies the others. Retire early without a healthcare bridge, and you start liquidating your portfolio for premiums, which reduces the base that compound interest operates on. Reduce that base, and your 4% rule is working off a smaller number, which means less income. Less income from the portfolio means more pressure to claim Social Security early to fill the gap. Claim Social Security early, and you lock in the permanent 30% reduction that follows you. For every year you live past 62, every force accelerates the damage of the others. This is why the 40-year retirement is categorically different from the 30-year retirement, and why the 4% rule was never designed to handle it. The real art is not about eliminating all risk, but about striking a smart balance between shielding your portfolio from a crash and making sure it grows enough to keep up with the cost of living. The well-known 4% rule was actually born from the problem of sequence risk, a massive stress test running a simple withdrawal strategy against some of the absolute worst market environments in US history. It was designed against historical 30-year windows. Retire at 55, live to 95, you need a 40-year window. The math degrades significantly. Morningstar's research found that 3.9% is the highest safe starting withdrawal rate for new retirees. Assuming a 40% stock and 60% bond portfolio, a 30-year time horizon, and a 90% probability of not running out of money. For a 40-year window, you need to go lower still. Let's call it 3% to be defensible. 3% of $500,000, $15,000 a year, $1,250 a month. Subtract healthcare, $1,100 a month. You have $150 left for food, housing, transportation, utilities, and the rest of adult life. I know that sounds absurd. It is absurd. And yet this is precisely the arithmetic facing a forced exit early retiree with median savings and no pre-Medicare healthcare bridge, trying to follow the rules that financial orthodoxy handed them. The sequence of returns risk means that even if your average portfolio returns are fine over your retirement years, you could still run out of money if the market performs badly at the beginning of your retirement, because you would be withdrawing money from the portfolio at the same time it is losing value. The most dangerous threat to the 4% rule is not a bad average return over 30 years. It's a market crash in the first 5 years of retirement. If your portfolio drops 40% in year 2 and you keep withdrawing the same amount, you're selling a much larger percentage of a smaller portfolio. The 40-year early retirement doubles your exposure window to this risk. You have more early years in which a bad sequence can permanently impair a portfolio that would have otherwise survived. You're not just unlucky if you hit a 2008 style crash in year 3 of your early retirement. You're potentially insolvent. Now here's where the subplot I've been building resolves. Remember Mark, the 54-year-old engineer who got restructured out of his job when he had $400,000 saved and a 65 target date. I told you he burned through $36,000 during his 18-month job search. I told you he took contract work at 60% of his previous salary. He didn't stop there. Here's what Mark did that mattered. He did not claim Social Security at 62. He took a contract project at 63, lower pay, no benefits, but enough income to cover living costs without touching the portfolio. He deferred Social Security until 64. Not perfect. He's still taking a partial reduction, but not 62. He enrolled in Medicare at 65. His contract income allowed him to leave the portfolio largely untouched from 58 to 65. At 65, Mark had around $460,000. His Social Security benefit at 64 was approximately $1,750 a month, rather than the $2,300 or so he would have received at 67. He lost about $550 a month for life. Over 20 years, that's $132,000 in lost income, a real cost. But he survived the forced exit with a functioning portfolio and a Medicare card and a livable income because he made one critical, non-obvious decision in the middle of chaos. He treated Social Security as a trade, not a relief valve. He delayed it as long as he could while covering costs some other way. That's not a fairy tale outcome. Mark will have less in retirement than if he'd worked to 65 as planned. His harvest was interrupted, but he gathered enough of it to carry him through. Most people in his situation don't. Most people in his situation claim Social Security at 62 because it's there and they need the income. They exhaust the flexibility in their system in year one. They spend the next 20 years managing the consequences. Here's a quick aside that I think captures the absurdity of how this usually plays out. Somewhere right now, there is someone who just got handed a severance package and is going through a checklist on the Social Security website. The website is clean, the colors are friendly. The button says, "Apply now," and they're thinking, finally, some money coming in. They are about to sign up for a 30% permanent pay cut on every check they will receive for the rest of their natural life. And the website doesn't say that prominently at the top in large red letters. I find this mildly interesting as a design choice. Okay, let me build the case study out in concrete dollar terms so this all lands at the real world level. Two brothers, same salary history, same employer, same 401k match, same everything. Robert retires at 55. He has $450,000 saved. He's tired, he's burned out, and he's made his decision. He is not claiming Social Security at 55. He knows he can't claim until 62 at earliest. He buys individual marketplace insurance, $1,050 a month. He withdraws 4% of his portfolio in year one, $18,000. His net available income after premiums, $5,400 per year, $450 a month. He begins supplementing from principal almost immediately. By 60, his portfolio has barely grown, the 4% withdrawal and healthcare costs have essentially offset any investment returns. At 62, Robert claims Social Security approximately $1,500 a month, assuming the current average reduced by 30%. His portfolio at 62, somewhere around $380,000 after 7 years of withdrawals and healthcare costs. He now has roughly $1,500 in Social Security and about $1,260 from a 3% portfolio withdrawal on $380,000. Total monthly income at 62, $2,760 before taxes, and Medicare is still 3 years away. David works until 65. Same starting balance of $450,000 at 55. He contributes $23,500 a year for 10 more years. At 7% average return, he walks into 65 with approximately $1,100,000. He's on Medicare from day one. Part B, premium around $174 a month. He claims Social Security at 67, his full retirement age, and receives the average benefit of around $2,071 per month. He withdraws 4% of $1,100,000, $44,000 per year. His total annual income, roughly $69,000. After Medicare, the income gap between Robert at 65 and David at 65, approximately $48,000 a year. Every year in David's favor. Same starting money, same number of years between age 25 and 55, 10 different years between 55 and 65. The harvest, Robert left before it, David stayed for it. Now, here's what you do with all of this. 3 specific things, not generic advice. These 3 things calibrated specifically to everything we've covered. 1, plan your retirement assuming you will exit 5 years earlier than you intend, not as a worst case, as the base case. About 5 years separates what Americans plan and what happens non-retirees target 66, while while most actually retire at 61. The 5-year gap is structural. It's not bad luck. There's a growing body of research demonstrating that investors do not tend to retire when expected, primarily retiring earlier. If your current retirement plan only survives the scenario you designed for, it will not survive the scenario you'll probably experience. Stress test everything against an exit at 60 if you're targeting 65. Build the buffer now, not later. 2. Before you calculate portfolio withdrawal rates, before you look at Social Security projections, before you do any of it, quantify your healthcare bridge. Your pre-Medicare insurance cost is not a budget line item. It's a fixed obligation that begins on your first day without employer coverage and doesn't end until your 65th birthday. Paying about $12,000 to $13,000 per year in premiums per person can consume a notable portion of annual retirement income, particularly for households relying on withdrawals from savings or investments. That number needs to be set aside separately in a dedicated fund earmarked untouchable. It is not part of your retirement spending portfolio. It is a known cost with a known duration. Treat it accordingly. 3. The Social Security delay decision is not a lifestyle choice. It is a financial instrument. For each year benefits are delayed past full retirement age, monthly payments increase by approximately 8% up to age 70. That 8% is guaranteed. It carries no market risk, no manager risk, no fee drag. No other asset class available to an ordinary American offers this combination. If you have any other way to cover your living expenses between 62 and 70 consulting work, part-time income, a systematic portfolio bridge strategy, delay Social Security and let the benefit grow. The break-even math generally favors waiting for anyone who lives past their late 70s. And most people reading this will live past their late 70s. The person who retires at 55 and claims Social Security at 62 has done 3 things simultaneously: stopped their best decade of compounding, opened a 10-year, $150,000 healthcare wound, and amputated 30% of their guaranteed monthly income for life. Those are not 3 separate mistakes. They are one unified failure to model the full system before pulling the lever. The person who retires at 65 or who plans for 55, but builds the architecture to survive 60, has closed all 3 of those gaps, not by accident, by doing the boring, unsexy actuarial work that nobody talks about on social media because it doesn't make a good thumbnail. You don't retire from the harvest, you retire after it. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. The retirement plan that actually works isn't the one that lets you leave earliest. It's the one that doesn't run.